On August 12, 2000, in the Barents Sea, the missile-carrying nuclear submarine, the Kursk, sank into the silent world, along with its 118-man crew. This catastrophe deeply wounded Russia and had an impact on the entire world. For almost 50 years, dozens of monster submarines have been sailing the seas. For the military, the oceans have become immense ramps for the launching of nuclear weapons. The Kursk was one of these formidable machines of radical dissuasion. This war weapon was part of a top-secret series of metal giants created to assure the balance of naval power between the Soviet Union and NATO. The deadliest of technical innovations were present inside this cigar-shaped mass of steel. It all began here on the banks of the Neva. The crew of the Kursk was trained in St. Petersburg at the finest naval academies of this second capital of Russia. One crew member, Captain Third Class Vasily Bykov, was in charge of satellite communications aboard the Kursk. On July 30th, 2 weeks before the tragedy, Vasily left the submarine with his commander's permission to continue his military studies. Thus, by chance, Vasily became one of the rare survivors of the catastrophe.
I came to pay my respects to my crew. I served aboard the Kursk with all these men for 5 years. I come back often to visit them. I miss all these friends. They're a part of the happiness I felt during my time aboard the submarine. This was my second family. When I heard about the tragedy, I asked myself why I wasn't with them. I should have been there. I could have helped them. I was lucky, of course. The day they sailed, I stayed on shore. It must have been my destiny. Someone had to remain alive to tell their story.
Кто-то должен помнить о них и рассказывать. В 5 лет службы на Курске это.
Those 5 years aboard the Kursk was the happiest time of my life. There were extraordinary moments of joy.
Что-то очень хорошее и веселое.
It was a wonderful ship. A technical miracle. That day, I was on the Kursk. I had guard duty. That was when the captain invited a group of pop singers aboard.
Vasily is seeing these images for the first time. After a concert by the pop music group Nana at the Vidayevo base in the spring of 2000, the captain offered the group a tour of the ship. An official and complete tour, including its most secret weapons, the missile launch tubes and the torpedo compartment.
That's me sitting there.
A final family photograph forever embedded in Vasily's memory. Hidden in the center of St. Petersburg, the historical birthplace of the Russian Navy, are some of the ex-Soviet Union's most secret institutes. All Soviet nuclear submarines were conceived behind these windows, from plans drawn up by the Rubin Naval Construction Company. The Kursk is part of the nuclear submarine series called Antheus, the name of the god of the sea, Poseidon's son. These metal giants of unmatched firepower were born here. In 1968, the Soviet Union decides to build a new generation of missile-carrying nuclear submarines in response to the construction by the United States of the world's first nuclear anti-aircraft carrier, the Nimitz. This fleet of ships, to which the Kursk belonged, was designed to fire a salvo of 24 revolutionary missiles from below the surface and destroy the new nuclear aircraft carrier and its entire squadron.
Предназначен для непрерывного скрытного.
Rear Admiral Mikhail Kuznetsov was commander of the nuclear submarine division to which the Kursk belonged.
Просто сама мощь Курска это.
The Kursk's power was comparable to 100 conventional warships, concentrated into one vessel. It was a colossus, 150 meters long and 18 meters high, and could cut through the water at 70 kilometers an hour. It was as easy to maneuver as a toy, a magnificent machine. The constructor put his soul into it. You could sail for a very long time underwater without the slightest psychological problem.
Before serving on the Kursk, I had served on other nuclear submarines, but I had never seen anything as new. In the beginning, it frightened me a little.
Левая вперед 40.
Есть левая вперед 40. Работает левая турбина вперед 40.
14 метров. Внимание, в центральном всплываем. Боцман всплывает.
Потом, по мере того, как ты начинаешь изучать этот корабль,
Little by little, I began to understand the connection between all the technical installations. And I realized that all these mechanisms around us were there to solve very specific problems. And after that, I wasn't frightened anymore. I remember the moment when it was our turn to go to sea. While the commander was supervising the maneuver for leaving the port, he gave the order to accelerate. The ship started to vibrate under my feet. I had this feeling of power. The vibrations went through my whole body. The wind blew into my face. I'd never felt such a sensation.
Vladimir Kuzin, Captain First Class, followed the history of the Antheus submarine's construction and is an expert on the subject.
Лодки с крылатыми ракетами первого поколения.
First generation submarines had 6 missiles. The next generation had 8. The handicap, however, was that the missiles could only be fired from the surface.
Первого поколения был существенный недостаток. Старт ракет был из надводного положения. Тогда-то, значит,
We not only had to increase their range and their destructive force, but we also had to design a submarine capable of transporting such equipment and firing them from under the water. And so we launched Nuclear Submarine Project 949 and then 949A, an improved version of the Antheus, and one of these submarines was the Kursk. The building of these ocean monsters was assigned to the Siewierodvinsk shipyards on the shores of the White Sea. The use of special steel for making the hull enabled these submersibles to dive more than 400 meters. 14 units were built by the Soviets over a 15-year period. The Kursk was equipped with new cruise missiles, the Granites, weighing 7 tons each. The huge submarine was built to transport 24 of these deadly weapons. Their range was 700 kilometers and could travel at twice the speed of sound. Fired in one salvo, these smart missiles could transperce enemy defense systems and annihilate their targets. The Kursk, the last of the Antheus series, became operational in 1995. The cost of this ultimate weapon was $2.3 billion.
Серьезно-то об этом никто не думал, что
No, nobody really thought that we would ever use these weapons. We hoped we would never have to, but we were morally ready to launch them.
Но к этому были готовы.
For safety and security purposes, the Kursk had to be divided into 9 compartments. The belly of this metal monster was a hallucinating tangle of cables and pipes all along a labyrinth-like gangway of lock chambers and electrical control panels. In a confined sanctuary, uranium, a practically limitless combustible, burns, hidden from curious eyes. The Russians revived their taste for torpedoes equipped with a propulsion system dating back to the Second World War, but which can be launched from underwater at 250 kilometers an hour. In case of a leak in its highly volatile fuel, however, a simple overheating of the circuits can cause an explosion. With these formidable weapons, this anti-aircraft carrier killer can also raze an entire city.
We were aware of the danger, because it's always present aboard ship, and it's this presence of danger which prevents us from doing anything thoughtless. The Kursk was comparable to a fortress.
The Rubin Naval Construction Office took great care in improving life aboard the Kursk for its 120-man crew. For dangerous missions, they had to provide maximum comfort over long weeks aboard. The architects realized that sailors and officers needed a real kitchen with a real chef, a sauna, swimming pool, gymnasium, and large rest and leisure areas for listening to music or just relaxing. No other submarine before the Kursk had provided such high-quality living conditions. A rescue and evacuation chamber with breathing equipment for each sailor was included above the command post. The Russians had imagined all sorts of catastrophe scenarios. There were 3 emergency exits on the Kursk, but each one presented a danger. Equipped with a survival suit, the men could escape through the evacuation chamber, which, if necessary, could detach itself and rise to the surface, or through the missile launch tubes, or through the 9th compartment's lock chamber at the rear of the ship.
The Kursk's commander was Gennady Petrovich Lyachin. It's a complex job that can't be summed up in a few words. You undoubtedly have to be born a commander to become one. His major qualities were a cool head and total self-control. There was always a silence at the central command post. If unusual situations are resolved calmly, it's because the crew has been well prepared and because it has a strong leader, the commander.
In 1999, Captain Lyachin was assigned to lead a mission including a 78-day submersion. The Kursk and its crew left Vidayevo and the Russian Arctic for the Mediterranean Sea.
And at that time, no submarine of this kind had ever carried out such a mission. It was an honor and a real first. Our main objective was to accomplish this long underwater mission without damage, and, of course, to observe NATO's aircraft carrier, which was in the Mediterranean. Sailing was smooth, without any outside interference.
The Kursk entered the Mediterranean through the Gibraltar Straits, very discreetly, thanks to the heavy maritime traffic. For even greater discretion, it sailed along the Moroccan coast, but it was spotted by the French Navy. The Kursk was monitored second by second. Some men, French golden ears, kept watch over the submarine. The Russians were playing cat and mouse with an American warship and ventured too close to an exercise zone near the French city of Toulon. French and Russian submariners listened to and watched each other. After almost 3 months of underwater navigation, the Kursk surfaced along the White Sea coast. At the secret base in Vidayevo, all the crew members' families were waiting anxiously on shore. Vice Admiral Mikhail Motsak victoriously welcomed the captain and crew.
Командир, капитан первого ранга Лячин. Товарищ начальник штаба Северного флота, оценку предварительно отлично подтверждаю. Старший на борту капитан первого ранга Кобелев. Есть. Вольно! Вольно! Здравствуйте, рад тебя видеть, с добрым здоровьем и после успешного. Вольно! Вольно! Сегодня ракетный крейсер...
Today, the Kursk has reached its home port. I am happy to see you here and to see that all your assignments have been accomplished successfully, since it was I who prepared you for this mission, and you are all alive and well without the slightest problem or even close call. In keeping with the tradition, Captain Gennady Lyachin, I offer you a suckling pig, and I thank you once again for the spectacular success of your mission. At 2 kilometers beyond the polar circle, the Vidayevo and Zapadnoye Litsa bases are home to the military garrisons of the Northern Fleet. Hidden in the fjords, these bases contain all types of nuclear submarines and are closed off from the outside world.
Если радость на всех одна, на всех и беда одна, море встает за волной волна, а за спиной спина. Здесь у самой кромки бортов друга прикроет друг. Друг всегда уступить готов, место в шлюпке и круг.
On the last Sunday of July 2000, the Kursk participates in the Naval Celebration Parade in Sevieromorsk. The finest missile-carrying submarine in the Northern Fleet is the main attraction. The crew is getting ready to leave for 3 days of maneuvers in the Barents Sea. Who could have imagined then that 2 weeks later, everything and everyone would disappear to the bottom of the sea? In the beginning of August 2000, the Russian Navy organizes maneuvers, which are announced with great fanfare by Moscow. In the Barents Sea, the Kursk is the jewel of the Northern Fleet. No less than 20 surface ships and submarines, plus the only Russian aircraft carrier, are deployed. Russia wants to show the entire world its grand return to the ocean. The exercises take place near the Norwegian coast, monitored closely by NATO forces. On August 12th, Commander Lyachin expresses satisfaction with the results, and the following day is to mark the end of the maneuvers. At 8:51 a.m., the crew of the Kursk is preparing for its final torpedo test. At 11:30, the submarine is in periscopic immersion at 18 meters below the surface. The Kursk's torpedo would never be fired. The Kursk was no longer responding. Nobody could understand, and concern began to grow. The silence was absolute, unbearable. At 17:30, the alarm was sounded. Undoubtedly, at that moment, all the men on the Kursk had already perished. During the night that followed, the wreck of the Kursk was located 108 meters below the surface, lying on its left side. The nose of the submarine was imprisoned in the silt. It wasn't until Monday, August 14th, 2 days later, that the Russians officially announced the accident. Since foreign ships had recorded 2 very powerful explosions at intervals of 2 minutes, the Russians could not conceal the catastrophe. Thus began a flood of contradictory information, a collision with another ship, torpedo fire, technical problems, all of which were denied. Newspapers criticized the slowness of the authorities, and the communiques simply added to the confusion as to the causes of the shipwreck, thus hiding the absence of real information.
This unique footage of the Kursk was filmed by Captain Tulchin, who watches them whenever they are shown. And at present, they are being shown by all the television news programs.
In 20 years of operation, this type of ship had never had a problem.
Captain Tulchin knows all these officers eating aboard the Kursk, but he doesn't want to give their names. What could have happened to the fleet's finest submarine? Most probably an explosion in the torpedo compartment.
They know that we would bang on the hull, and the men were hoping to be rescued. They were afraid that they were living the final moments of their lives.
Saturated with conflicting television reports, the entire world wanted to know what had really happened. Families of crew members returned from their summer vacations and flocked into Vidayevo, where a herd of reporters were waiting for them. 2 days after the tragedy, wives and mothers demanded to know the truth and refused to give up hope.
My husband, Captain Third Class Nikolai Belazarov, was inside the Kursk. I'm pleading with the television stations to broadcast information that will keep our hopes alive. They must give us hope. Russia has the ability to intervene. Other countries can help us. We still have hope. We're sure our husbands and sons are still alive. They're alive and will soon be with us again.
Captain Lyachin's wife also came to Vidayevo.
They say all sorts of things, but I don't listen to anyone. I want official information. Listening to rumors is useless. I'll wait for the Chief of Staff.
Sergei lost his father in the catastrophe.
If what they say on television is true, it's horrible. In the Kursk's first compartment, there were just torpedoes in an area the size of 6 gymnasiums. If that exploded, the result would be hard to imagine.
On August 29th, 5 days later, Russia officially requested help from England and Norway.
A submarine is not designed to lie in the mud at the bottom of the sea. I immediately realized this was an exceptional situation and that the Kursk had encountered a very serious problem.
With each passing minute, I waited to hear that the men had evacuated the submarine. I was in a state of shock. The Vidayevo base seemed dead. All the people there were walking with their heads down, in silence. Time had stood still, suspended in an unbearable waiting period.
Serving aboard a submarine is not an ordinary activity. We all know that there is no such thing as zero risk. And we also know that when we dive, things can go bad very quickly.
From the outset of the drama, communication breakdowns, even within the Navy Chief of Staff, prevent the new president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, from intervening. When he arrives, it is already too late. The people criticize him for being kept in the dark and for not immediately accepting foreign assistance which could have saved lives. Putin, Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the military, now realizes that he has to save the honor of Russia. Norwegian divers open the rear lock chamber. The 9th compartment is full of water. There are no survivors. After 10 days of hesitation, Moscow officially announces the death of all 118 men aboard the Kursk and declares a national mourning period. The country's president promises financial help to the victims' families. On Tuesday, August 22nd, the authorities face a deluge of accusations, and the parents of the dead reject any commemorative ceremony as long as the bodies have not been returned to them.
You were incompetent! I say this to the whole world! You went off the deep end, letting a boat out that had hardly sailed since 1999? I'm sure you don't have children! You did nothing! Nothing!
Это надо хоть одному из правительства прийти в квартиру официально.
Люди или нет? Прекратите съемку.
Они их сказали.
The authorities brought only the mothers and the wives together to officially announce the news. It was cruel, but necessary, and better than what television was doing, that is, keeping hopes up. It was better to tell the truth once and for all.
Anyone who has studied the event of the tragedy know that the sailors who died instantly were lucky. Dying slowly, little by little, in hellish conditions as prisoners of the submarine is really a nightmare. It must be horrible.
On the body of one of the sailors, Dima Kolesnikov, we found his handwritten notes. In the hours that followed the accident, he talks about he found himself in the 9th compartment with excellent specialists who know how the emergency lock chamber functioned. The fact that they were unable to use it signifies that the explosion deformed and damaged it. There was no electricity at that moment, as Kolesnikov mentions that he was riding in the dark. The damage was irreparable, and therefore they could take advantage of their one chance to get out. I studied all the rescue attempts. Everything that was humanely possible at that moment was tried.
For the Russian president, the Kursk disaster becomes a political affair and one of national honor. He promises to raise the Kursk and return the bodies of the victims to their families. In December 2000, the Dutch company Mammoet wins the $60 million contract offered by the government for raising the submarine. In June 2001, Igor Spassky, director of the Rubin Naval Construction Firm, supervises technical operations, assisted by Vice Admiral Mikhail Motsak.
Еще до того, как началась эта операция, мы понимали, что
We quickly realized that every possible security measure had to be taken before beginning the operation. We took into account all possible extreme situations. We examined every imaginable option with the Mammoet company.
Группы безопасности, которую создала компания «Мамут» для контроля за ходом этих работ.
A huge work site is launched on the Barents Sea. The barge Giant 4, especially built in Amsterdam, is 140 meters long and equipped with 26 piston-operated cylindrical guides. The submarine is securely fastened to the immense barge, and its hoisting systems should enable it to raise the ship. This operation, unique in the world, would take place under Giant 4. Completely disemboweled by the explosion, the front part of the submarine is imprisoned in a thick layer of silt. It was there that the explosion had taken place, and there's nothing left but a heap of iron and a maze of metal cables.
Okay, it should be okay.
Russian, then English and Dutch divers, thanks to a diving bell, are able to reach the wreck. Their first mission is to carefully inspect each compartment and make certain that there is no longer any danger. 4 teams of 3 men each work round the clock in 6-hour shifts at 100 meters below the surface.
These screens are our eyes. From above, we control every stage of the operation, and we also watch the work of the divers. I saw the Kursk stuck in the silt. It was terrible. I served on that submarine, and I walked on its deck. And when I dived for the first time, I had an enormous shock. It was hard to admit that that was all that was left. And when I went inside, I knew, of course, that the men were in there. In what shape would we find them? We could only imagine.
The divers cut the dismembered nose of the wreck. They drilled 26 holes, 70 centimeters in diameter, and fastened cables to the submarine before attempting to raise it. Rubin's director, Igor Spassky, signed the contract with the Dutch firm Mammoet. This is the most important operation of his career. He knows that the most difficult moment will be when they have to tear the Kursk from the silt in which it has been embedded for over a year. The mast that has to be raised is enormous. A lifting capacity of 35,000 tons is necessary for raising the submarine. It is here at the Krylova Institute that the mechanical systems indispensable to refloating the ship were tested. This time, the Russians have no margin for error. On October 4th, 2001, the Russian authorities announced that they are ready to bring the Kursk to the surface. On Monday, October 8th at 9 a.m., it's raised 6 meters. At 11 a.m., the immense coffin is 58 meters above the seabed.
От 53 до 80.
Кормовая, носовая группа и субмарина. Тебе Васильевич.
Наша баржа стоит уже по ветру.
Our barge is solidly fastened under the wind. It's well secured to the submarine. Most of the dangers have been eliminated. Everything is very solid. We have 5 more hours of hoisting. 50 meters at 9 meters per hour. We succeeded in raising the Kursk's huge mass. It's a unique event in the history of underwater work.
In all, it takes 12 hours to raise the Kursk and secure it solidly under the barge.
It's fantastic.
A gigantic operation successfully completed less than a year and a half after the tragedy.
It's an incredible mountain of emotion. We did it. It's extraordinary.
I'm really very glad that we can bring the Kursk with the bodies were still there, that we can bring it home.
Vasily Isayenko died in the accident, leaving his wife Galina alone with 2 children.
A year ago, when they said they were going to raise the Kursk, I was against it. We thought they were lying to us again, that they were only worried about military secrets and not about the men. We were very surprised when they began to bring the submarine up. Now I have to admit that they were right. They managed to recover the bodies. I'm glad we can give them a real grave.
Solidly secured under the immense barge, the Kursk is towed to the Rozlyakovo military base. 2 specially prepared docking pontoons await this strange, funeral-like convoy. The Kursk and its crew were not destined to remain 108 meters below in the world of silence. Similar tragedies had already taken place. American, Russian, and French submarines had sunk in the past, but at such depths that they simply were crushed by the pressure and lost forever, far from all media. The final outcome of this incredible operation would end 18 months after the dramatic event. The submarine lies in its dock. The water is slowly emptied to enable the entire wreck to be in the open air. On October 25, 2001, an especially equipped team enters the submarine for the first time.
Юрий Петрович, я должен первым видео, а вы со спины. Там было 4 тела в прошлом году. Иду.
Rear Admiral Mikhail Kuznetsov followed every step of the refloating effort. The men on the Kursk had been his friends. They had sailed together aboard this formidable war machine.
I was assigned what was undoubtedly the most painful job. My team and I identified the men we found inside the Kursk and then put them in coffins. We experienced some very difficult moments. Our doctors did a remarkable job in identifying the victims. All the bodies found were identified and returned to their homeland.
The inquiry enters a new phase. Public prosecutor Vladimir Ustinov is assigned to investigate the interior of the ship.
Мы сегодня с вами вместе осмотрим носовую часть.
Today we are gathered here facing what remains of the front part of the Kursk. You will be able to understand the extent of the damage suffered by the submarine and the destruction caused by the blast. This is what is left of the second compartment where the submarine's command post was located, as well as all the navigation systems and the majority of the crew members. Let me remind you that between the first and second explosion there was an interval of only 135 seconds, which is why nobody could put on his life jacket. There was no time. It was impossible. The water invaded the ship, filling it in 6 to 7 hours, up to the 9th compartment. This was confirmed by a letter found on the body of one of the crew members stating that after the explosions, even the 9th compartment in the rear had suffered damage. Everything happened very quickly. This compartment filled up with water in less than an hour. The man had difficulty writing. All this proves that those who believe that something could have been done to save our sailors must face the fact that it was impossible. I will end this explanation with a tribute. I take my hat off and I bow in honor of these men who died here.
И поклониться тем людям, которые здесь погибли.
The crew members of the Kursk were buried in St. Petersburg on November 17, 2001. Captain Gennady Lyachin rejoined his men on March 23, 2002. At the very same moment throughout all of Russia, from the White Sea to the Pacific Ocean, a solemn tribute is paid to the commander of the Kursk.
Вот так, даже в таком трагическом случае, командир.
And so, even in a tragedy of these proportions, the captain was last to leave the ship.
Всему героическому экипажу добрая память.
May we always keep with us the eternal memory of the heroic crew of the Kursk.
Пусть она будет им пухом.
Vladimir Putin had kept his promise. The bodies of the sailors had been returned to their homeland.
It was suggested and ordered that I resign from my post as commander. In spite of everything, I consider myself a sufficiently experienced submarine officer, more so than those who stayed in Vidayevo after I left. I could still be of service in training captains and crews, but the decision was made by my superiors. And so I'll leave to start a new life.
В новой жизни.
I don't know what I'll do in the future, but if I'm lucky enough to find a good crew and a good ship, I'd be happy to go to sea again. I'm afraid, though, that another ship like the Kursk and another crew like the one we had doesn't exist.
Синее море, только море за кормой. Синее море, и далек он путь домой. Там за туманами, вечными пьяными, там за туманами берег наш родной. Ждет Севастополь, ждет Камчатка, ждет Кронштадт. Верит и ждет земля родных своих ребят. Там за туманами, вечными пьяными, там за туманами жены их не спят.